Hi guys, and welcome to my channel. In this video, I'm going to teach you about arrays and objects. This is going to be an introduction video, and I will film a couple more videos where I explain more advanced topics. So make sure to watch all of the videos that will be in this playlist. So again, we will cover everything from the beginning to more complex and advanced topics until you understand everything in depth. And this topic is something that every single developer should know about and should understand. So I will probably film all of the videos right now, but I will publish a new part each week so that I don't have to edit one very long video because, as many of you already know, currently I am very busy with preparing my practical programming course and I'm putting all of my focus into that. So all of my knowledge and over 10 years of experience is going into this course so that it prepares you to start working in the real world and finally stop watching videos and tutorials and just start working. So that is the goal of the course. And after finishing the course, you will have a strong, in-depth understanding of programming so that you can continue building your knowledge on your own as you advance in your programming career, because as a developer, you will never really stop learning, but you will be able to do it on your own. Also, this community means a lot to me because you have been following me for a long time, and I feel like you should have a special discount when compared to other people. So I will put a link in the description of this video that you can use to sign up, and I will send you a discount once the course launches. It is completely free to sign up, but make sure to do it right now because the number of people that can get this discount is limited. So if you're interested, there will be a link in the description for you. So with that being said, let's continue with the topic of today's video. First, I want to say that if you are not familiar with array data structure at all, make sure to watch this video because here I explained all the basics and everything that you need to know in order to be able to follow this video. It will also be linked in the description. So make sure to watch that video and then you can come back here. But if you already understand arrays of primitive data types, then you can continue watching this video. So here I have the list of topics that we will cover in this video. And then after this video, there will be more parts where we cover more complex topics about arrays and objects. So please don't mind me reading because I don't want to forget something important. So we will learn what are arrays of objects. We will learn how they are different from arrays of primitive data types. So what is the difference between array of objects and array of primitive data types? We will also learn why and when you should use arrays of objects. I will teach you how you can access an individual object in the array, also how you can access and modify object properties from the elements of the array. We will see how you can use loops in order to perform operations on arrays of objects, and I will teach you about most common errors that happen very often, especially to beginners when working with arrays. And also at the end, there will be a task for you so that you can practice on your own in order to get a better understanding of this topic. Because as you already know, watching my video is going to help you to understand the topic, but in order to make it permanent in your head, you will have to practice on your own as well. So these are the topics that we are going to cover in today's video. So let's start. So the first thing that I want to explain is what are arrays of objects and how are they different from arrays of primitive data types. So in order to understand that, let's create an array of primitive data types. Let's say that I want to create an array of integers. I will call it lucky numbers. And it is going to be an array of 5 integers. Let's initialize it. Let's say 1, 3, 5, 13, and 21. Okay, so with this line here, I have created an integer array that has 5 elements, and it is called lucky numbers. And here I have initialized those 5 lucky numbers. So this is an array of primitive data types. And as you already know, we use arrays in order to group elements of the same type together. And arrays store those elements in consecutive memory, which means one after the other. So this array here has allocated 5 memory containers to store these 5 numbers, and those containers, those little boxes where you store these numbers, are one after the other in memory. And that is the characteristic of an array, and it doesn't matter if you're storing primitive data types or if it is an array of objects. So this is an array of primitive data types. Now, if I wanted to store objects into an array, that would be a little bit more complex. So let's say, for example, that we are working with students. We want to make an application that is working with students, and we want to store an array of students. So let's see how would that go. First thing that I would need is a class called student. So let's create that. Let's say class student, like this, and make sure to have this semicolon at the end. Okay, so here I will define the properties for my student class. Let's say string name, and then let's say int age, char, gender, and what else? Let's say that student will have float programming grade, like this. Okay, so these are 4 characteristics and 4 properties that we want to store about our student. So now what I can do is I can create objects of class student, and I can store them in my array. But one very important thing before I continue is to make all of these public so that we are able to access these properties outside of this class. Okay, it's very important to make them public. Okay, now let's create an object of type student. Let's say student, let's call it S1. Okay, and now I will initialize the properties of students. I will say S1.name will be, let's say, Saldina. Okay, and then let's say S1.age is 28. And then S1.gender will be, let's put these single quotation marks, and I will put here F for female. Okay, and let's say S1.programming grade. I will give myself grade of 9 because there is always place for improvement. Okay, and with this, I have created one student. Now, what I can do is I can create an array and add this student to my array. So let's see how we can create an array of objects. This is how we created an array of primitive data types. So now the logic is going to be the same for an array of objects. I will copy this here. So here, instead of creating an array of integers, we will create an array of students. Like this. I will call it students. Okay. And it is going to be an array of, let's say, 3 students. Okay. So with this, I have created an array of students that can have max 3 students. So now let's see how we can add this student here, Saldina, to my array. So I will say students of 0 is equal to S1. Now, what does this mean? First thing that you should need to know is that indexation of the array starts with 0. What does that mean? That means that the first element of the array has the index of 0, and then second has the index of 1, third has the index of 2, and so on. So that is one very important thing. Why are the indexes important? They are important because you use them to access individual elements of the array. So here is the example. Here we used index 0 of students array to access the first element of the array. And there we stored our student, the one that we created here. So with these 2 lines, we have created an array of students that has 3 elements. And on the first position in the array, we have stored this student here. So this is one way that you can use to add elements to the array. So now I can manually create 2 more students like I did here, and then I can add them to my array. Okay, so that is one way to initialize your array. Another way that I could use is I could create a constructor here inside my students class, and then I could initialize my array of students very similar to this approach here, where we had these curly brackets, and inside these curly brackets, I've initialized all of the elements. So let's see how does that approach look like. So the first thing that I will need is a constructor for my student class. Again, make sure that everything that you put inside your student class is under this public access modifier so that it is publicly accessible. Okay, so let's create constructor. Let's call it student. I mean, that is the name that you have to give to the constructor because constructor has the same name as the class that it belongs to, and it doesn't have any return type, not even void. So this here is constructor, and the constructor will receive 4 parameters. So it will receive string name, it will receive int age, and then char gender, and let's say float programming grade. Okay, and here I will initialize these properties based on the values that I've received here in the constructor. So I will say name is equal to name. Okay, so the property of my student will be equal to the parameter that I received into my constructor, because I am constructing a completely new object based on the values that I received into my constructor. Okay, so name will be equal to this name, and then age will be equal to the age, gender, like this, and then programming grade will be equal to this programming grade here. Okay, with this we have created constructor. So now what I can do is I can show you a second way to initialize student. Now, one very important thing that you are going to see here is that now this student, the way that we have created it here without initializing it, says that now there is no default constructor for student class, and you cannot do this any longer. Because if you're not familiar with constructors, please make sure to watch this video here. I will also put it in the description, and there you will get an in-depth understanding of different types of constructors. But basically what this error here means is that now there is no way for me to create a student without passing all of these properties here. And one way to fix that problem is to delete this code. Another way is to create default constructor. So I will very fast create default constructor. Okay, and this here is default constructor, completely empty constructor, and now we don't have the error anymore. Again, if you're confused about constructors, please make sure to watch the video about constructors and different types of constructors that I will link in the description. Okay, so once again, here we have created parameterized constructor, and based on this constructor, we can now construct our students. Now, let's see how we can initialize our array of objects like we did here, like we initialized our array of lucky numbers. Well, here what I can do, let's delete this. Let's also delete this. Okay, and here I will say that this array of 3 students will be equal to the following. And now, inside each curly bracket, I will initialize 1 student. And I will do that based on these parameters here. So the first thing is string name. So I will put these double quotation marks, and I will say Saldina. That is the name for my first student. And then age is 28. It is integer, so we don't put double quotation marks. And then gender is female. And then programming grade, as I said, is 9. Okay, that would be the first student. Now let's do the same for the second student. Let's say second student will be Elon. Age will be, I don't know how old he is, maybe 50. And then gender is male, and programming grade, let's give him a 10. Okay, and then let's also add Bill Gates. Okay, he is probably around 60. Male, and programming grade, let's give him a solid 7. Okay, so with this, we have initialized an array of objects, and here I have an error, and the error is because I don't have semicolon at the end here. Okay, so this is the second way that you can initialize an array of objects. And with this, we have created an array called students. It is an array of 3 students, and here we have initialized those 3 students. Okay, so that is the second way. And then there is the third way that I'm going to show you, and that would be to allow your user who is going to use your application to enter his own values. So in order to do that, we will learn how to use loops in order to access and modify elements of the array. So this approach here, I'm going to comment it. Okay, and I will again create array of students. It will have 3 elements, but I will not initialize it. I will not initialize it like this. I will give my user the opportunity to enter his own values. So for that, I will use for loop. I will say for int I is equal to 0, I is less than 3, I plus plus. Okay, so inside this for loop, we will iterate through 3 elements of my array, and we will enter each element. So we will enter each student. Now, one very important thing to keep in mind is that as I already said, indexation of the array starts with 0. So the first element will have index 0, and it's very important that you set 0 here for your I if you are entering elements from the beginning of the array. And then this part here says, please enter elements while I is less than 3, which means that you cannot enter any more than 3 elements into your array. And later I will show you one very common error that happens, especially to beginners regarding this. So here I have created for loop. And now what I want to do is I want to say cout, and then let's say student, and let's print I here like this, and let's put an end line so that our user knows that he is entering the first student and then second and third. Okay, and then here I will create an object of type student. I will say student and I will call it S. Okay, and then now I will ask my user to enter each individual property of my student. So I will say cout name, please enter name. Okay, and then I will say cin s.name. So whatever our user enters, that will be stored in s.name. And I am missing these redirection signs like this. Okay, and we will do the same thing for the remaining 3 properties. Okay, so name, age, gender, and programming grade. So name, and then age, s.age, and then gender, s.gender, and then programming grade. And here I will print so that my user knows that he is entering programming grade. So after the user enters these 4 properties, what I want to do is I want to take this student that now has all of the values that our user has entered, and I want to add that student to my array. So I will say students of I is equal to S. And here I have an error. As you can see, my array is called student. It should be called students because that makes more sense because we are talking about the collection, more objects, plural. Okay, so with this, I have added this current student to the position of I into my students array, which means that in the first iteration, we are adding to the first position. In the second iteration, we are adding to the second position. And in the third, we are adding to the third position. And again, keep in mind that those positions are not 1, 2, and 3. They are 0, 1, and 2. Okay, now let's start this program to see if everything works as expected. But first, I will put a breakpoint here, and later I will explain why I did that. Okay, so I will start my program, and as you can see, it says, please enter student 0. So the name for student 0 will be Saldina, and then age 28, gender will be F, programming grade will be 8, and then student 1, let's say Elon, and then age is 50 maybe, gender is male, programming grade is 9, okay, and then student 2, which is our third student, will be Bill. Age will be 65 maybe, gender will be male, and programming grade will be 10. Okay, now our application has executed all of the code, and as you can see here, the application was paused at the last line before leaving our program, before finishing our application. So now what I want to do is I want to hover over this students array, and I want to see if we have all of the students that we have entered. And as you can see here, indeed, we do have 3 elements, and here are the indexes 0, 1, and 2. And here are the values that we have entered for our students. We can expand them like this to see all the details. Okay, so as I said, this here is the way that you can use in order to ask your user to enter the values for the properties of each individual element of your array. And a few things that I want you to keep in mind here are following. First thing, I would like to add I+1 here because even though we as programmers should know that indexation of the array starts with 0, it doesn't really make sense to for our end user to have this, please enter student 0. He expects to see something like, please enter student 1. So that is why I am adding +1 here. But in the background, we are still using I without that additional 1. So that is the first thing. And then the second thing that you learned here is that this is the approach that you can use in order to allow your user to enter the values for elements of your array. And then this is how you can add those elements to your array. Okay, So another thing that I want to teach you here is how can we now access individual properties of each element of the array? So let's do that now. Let me show you, for example, how you can check what is the programming grade of the first student. So let's say cout, and then let's say programming grade of first student is, okay, and here I am using my students array, and then I am accessing the first student. The index of the first student is 0, okay, and then I want to check his programming grade, like this. And as you can see, you will get all of the values by your IntelliSense. So you will get all of these values already offered to you. So I want programming grade. And let's just move it to the next line. Okay. And now if I start my program, we should be able to see the programming grade of the first student. So let's do that very quickly. Okay, name is Saldina. I will fast forward this part. So now if I press enter, we should be able to see the information about programming grade of the first student, and it says that it is 8. So let's check that. And as you can see here, we indeed entered 8 for programming grade for the first student. Okay, so that is how you can access properties of each individual element. For example, if you wanted to change the name of the second student, you would do that like this. You would say students of 1, that is the second student. It has index of 1. And now I will say name, okay, and let's say that Ilona. Okay, so this is how you can do that. Now, what is the benefit of having an array of objects? Well, the main benefit is that now all of these objects are together, they are inside one collection, and now we can perform different calculations and different operations on this collection of objects. So now I'm going to show you that. So let's say, for example, that I want to calculate the average grade for all of the students. Now, let's comment this part here because I don't want to enter all the students manually every time. And I will uncomment this part here. Okay, this also should be commented because now we have two arrays called students, and that is not possible. So here we have all the students. We will not have to enter them manually. And now I want to calculate average grade for all of the students. Now, how are we going to do that? Well, I will first create a float variable called sum of grades, where I will store the sum of all the grades. It is going to be of type float because our grades are of type float, even though I have entered here integer numbers. So now let's say here 9.5, for example. So what I want to do inside the sum of grades, again, is I want to sum all the grades of all of my students, and then I will divide that by 3. So in order to do that, I will use for loop. I will iterate from 0 to 3. So I will say int I is equal to 0, I is less than 3, and then I plus plus. Okay, and here I will simply say sum of grades plus equals to students of I, and please give me his programming grade, like this. So inside this for loop, we are going to sum all of the programming grades. And then once this for loop finishes, here I can say cout average grade is, and then here I will say sum of grades divided by 3, because we have 3 students. So now if we start the program, let's see what's going to happen. Okay, we have an error actually. Let's see what is the error. And the error says uninitialized local variable sum of grades used. Well, that means that here we don't have initial value for sum of grades variable, and initial value is going to be 0 because we don't want to change the sum of all of these elements, and 0 is neutral when it comes to adding operation. So now if I start the program, let's see the result, and the result is going to be 8.83. Now you can use calculator in order to check this very quickly, but it should be correct. 9.5 plus 10 plus 7 divided by 3 is the same number that we got here. Okay, so that is how you can access individual properties of each element of the array by using the name of the array and index of the element, and then you can access all of the individual properties. So let's do a quick recap of all the things that we have learned in this video, and then I will give you a task that you can use in order to practice on your own. So first, I've shown you how you can create an array of primitive data types. Here we have created an array of integers, and then I have shown how you can create an array of objects. Here we have created an array of objects, and I explained 3 different ways that you can use to initialize that array. First approach was to create an object and then add it manually to a certain position in your array. That was first approach. That code is deleted now. Second approach is you can initialize it like this. So you can initialize all of the elements or one part of the elements like this when you are creating your array. That would be second approach. And then third approach is this code that is commented right now. And that is to ask your user to enter all the values for your array, and then you create an object and you add that object to your array. And to iterate through all of the elements of your array, you use for loop. Okay, and then we have also explained how you can work on that collection of elements, because the main benefit and the main purpose of having an array of objects is so that you have those objects together inside one collection, and then you can perform different operations on those elements. And here I have demonstrated how you can perform different calculations on those objects. And here we have seen how to calculate average grade for all the students that we have inside our array. So that is a short recap. Now I want to show you one very important and very common error that happens especially to beginners, but even to more experienced developers when it comes to arrays. And that error is index out of bounds or index out of range. Now I'm going to show what I mean by this. Let me very quickly comment this part again, because I don't want to enter elements manually, because we already have our array of 3 students initialized here. Okay, so how can I reproduce that error? For example, here I can put 4 instead of 3. So now we are iterating through an array that goes from 0 and is less than 4. So 0, 1, 2, and 3. And we could achieve the same thing if we did something as simple as adding this is equal to 3. So again, we are iterating from 0, 1, 2, and then 3 as well. Okay, because there is a difference between this and this. And in this situation, we are going to get an error, index out of bounds or index out of range. So if I start my program, you will see average grade is minus 3.53. You will get some number that doesn't make any sense. And the reason for that is that here we are accessing a memory that is not our own. So inside our array, we have 3 elements, and their positions are one after the other in memory. But there's also 4th and 5th and 6th position in memory, but that memory, that position is not ours. And here our array is accessing students of 3, which is someone else's memory location. And God knows what is stored inside that memory location. And that is the reason why we are getting this error here. And this case here is a lot more dangerous than getting an exception, because here you are getting a completely wrong result. And in many situations, if you had a lot of students, you wouldn't probably even be aware that you are getting a wrong calculation. And this type of error here is called index out of bounds or index out of range, which means that you are accessing elements that are out of range or out of bounds of your array. And you should not do that. You must not do that. So that is one very, very important thing to keep in mind. And again, it is less dangerous when you get the warning from your compiler that you are accessing locations that are not yours. But this case here that I have demonstrated is a lot more dangerous, because here you are getting the result, but the result is completely false and it's wrong, and it can cause many problems in an application that goes into production with this bug. So that would be the most common error that happens to especially beginners when they start working with arrays. It doesn't matter if you're working with arrays of objects or arrays of primitive types. This is very, very common error. So as I promised in the beginning, I have a task that you can use in order to practice on your own. So what I want you to do for homework until my next video is you can create a class like I did here, but it is going to be a class called product. And each product will have name, it will have price, and it will have type. Type of a product can be something like clothes or food or tech, types like that. And then what I want you to do is I want you to create an array of products, and I want you to allow to your user, like I did here, to enter 5 or 10 or even more products. And then you are going to perform different calculations on those products. For example, you are going to calculate what is total amount of clothes, all of the products that are of type clothes. And then what is total price of all of the products that are of type tech or food, and so on. So I want you to do that task as homework so that you can practice on your own until I publish my next video. And when I do, it will be linked here and also in the description. So definitely use the next couple of days to practice until my next video, and I will publish my next video next week. And if this video was valuable to you, if you enjoyed it and if you learned something new, please give it a thumbs up so that YouTube doesn't make me film dancing reels, because for some reason YouTube likes dancing reels. And somehow I believe that this video gives you a lot more value and knowledge. So if you want to tell to the YouTube algorithm, hey, this video is good and I want more videos like this one, please give it a thumbs up. So thank you very much for watching. If you have any questions, feel free to leave those in the comment section. As I said, I will film more videos about this topic and I can answer all your questions in those videos. So again, thank you very much for watching and I will see you in some other video. Bye.